I wanted to play this short video to kind of put a visual to what we're learning about.
Okay.
Everybody hear it okay?
It's pretty quiet.
I don't hear anything.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's because you're on mute, Matt.
8:44 a.m.
Is that better?
Columbia re-entered the Earth's
Yeah, if you want to turn the volume up as high as you can on your computer.
There might be some plasma now. What was it called about that show? Looks like a blast furnace.
Control. Control's been stable. We have good trims. I don't see anything out of the ordinary. Okay.
It's noisy in there, but
before touchdown at 8:54 in the morning. There was an unusual reading from one of the shuttle's many sensors.
Right back. Go ahead. FYI, I've just lost 4 separate temperature transducers on the left side of the vehicle, hydraulic return temperatures. 4 high return temps? To the left outboard, left inboard elbow.
And Columbia, Houston, we see your tire pressure messages, and we did not copy your last.
Instrumentation, Max? Flight Max, those are also off.
Columbia, Houston, com check. Columbia, Houston, UHF, com check. Columbia, Houston, com check. Columbia, Houston, UHF, com check. Columbia, check.
GC flight. Flight, you say block the doors. Copy.
"38 miles above ground. All 7 on board were killed. The question was, what had gone wrong?
I think that gives us a pretty good starting point of what the case was about, kind of what we're dealing with. The case goes in more depth of what the problem was. So who wants to kind of give us some background on the findings that they found through while Columbia was in orbit?
Hey, Matt, real quick, I think we have to offer a prayer at the beginning, so if we want to quickly do that. And then
Sure.
Yeah, I don't want to miss that.
Yeah, anybody want to volunteer?
Sure, I can do it.
Thanks, Cheryl.
No problem. Dear Heavenly Father, please bless us as we gather this evening, that our hearts and minds will be focused on the project that's ahead of us, that we will receive inspiration that will lead us in our discussion so that we may fully grasp the knowledge that awaits us. We ask these things in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks, Nathan.
Yep.
So who wants to give a quick background of some of the information that was in the case as far as some of the findings and some of the problems they found while Columbia was in orbit.
Okay, I can do that too.
Thanks, Cheryl.
No problem. The general problem was that this foam debris had hit this craft and taken away these plate things that were a crucial piece of the outer skin of the craft that keeps it from burning up during re-entry into orbit. The overarching problem is the lack of a chain of hierarchy for responsibility for who's in charge of what here. Their risk assessment as to how dangerous this type of thing was. Their lack of respect for the humans that were on this spacecraft, as far as the consequences of them, the decisions they make in regards to their lives, and just a general, just a mess. I mean, it's really the only way to explain it. Everything was done in a way that, if it was a company, a privately held company, they wouldn't exist anymore, and they would be sued for whatever dollar they had in their possession.
And they'd be in jail.
In jail too. Thank you, Mike.
What's it like living without the internet?
All right, awesome. So some of the things that they want us to talk about, I think Cheryl, you already summarized what the issue is. Both there being technical issues as well as organizational issues. And I think it is important to recognize that there is both. They do have a obvious technical issue. That's why the shuttle exploded. But as far as fixing the problems that they find and that they have, organizationally, they completely shut down and completely failed. So they talk about the recovery window for this case, from where they found the big piece of foam falling off the shuttle, and before they come back into orbit and explode. It's about a 16-day period. So they had 16 days. It's not like the shuttle launched and blew up. They have quite a bit of time to address these issues. So they go on and they're asking us, what is the human cognitive biases? What are human cognitive biases, and how does it apply?
I didn't really understand that part of it, so I'm a little confused on that.
Yeah, the
What does that mean?
the little definition they give us is our systematic errors in judgment, or our confirmation bias, our tendency to look for information that confirms things that we already think that are already existing in our views. And then there's also the sunk cost bias, which is our tendency to escalate commitment to a course of action into which we've already invested time, money, and other resources. So how do you guys think either of those things apply to the case we're talking about?
Yeah, so I think all of them apply. I think when we read about that whole Russian roulette thing and how they had these problems over and over again and nothing ever happened, so it's like, well, if nothing's ever going to happen, then we're just going to keep doing it. There's no need to fix it.
Right.
And so I think that's how that plays in. I was shocked that, I mean, it kept saying that the left side or the left or right side kept having this problem. Well, it's had that problem for 30 or 40 years now. We can't stop foam from falling off of this thing? I don't understand.
Yeah,
doesn't that seem like, I mean, we could send a rocket into space, but we can't stop foam from falling off of it. I don't get it.
Yeah, I would think if they've had the problem, I think if they've had that problem for 30 or 40 years, you would think they would at least find a solution by now. It's coming to the point where, yeah, I understand it didn't really cause a lot of issues. That wasn't the main focus on what causes the issues for the crashes or the explosions, but still, if it's part of the problem, you need, people that are astronauts, people that are doing this as a life, as a career, I would hope that their families, if it was me, or if I was a spouse of someone that's going up in space, and I knew that this could be a possibility that could lead to a disaster and kill my, my spouse, I think I'd be a little concerned, So I would hope that, they do everything they can to figure out the problem and get it fixed. That's a lot of time to go by, why is one side working and the other? Obviously, the one side's working, so, and look at it, see what's making it work fine, and attach it to the other side. I think that's the best way to figure it out,
Yeah, or just make it work from the beginning. Like, the first time it fell off, it should have been fixed.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand.
Other thing you have to realize is the crew that's going up doesn't know there's a problem.
Right.
These crews are not being made aware of the issues.
Well, yeah, but the crews know that there were foam problems in the past. I think that's what we're saying. The foam has been falling off of these space shuttles for 40 years. Like I think the thing said that there was a foam that has fallen off and hit the space shuttle on basically every single launch.
Yes,
since its inception.
Yeah, but the crews aren't aware of that. Where did you see that it said the crews were aware of it?
Well, it's been in the news. I don't know how they wouldn't be. I mean, I had heard about this before it ever happened. Right? I mean, it's in every after-action report that they've ever done, I think, that they've had foam falling off.
Yeah,
I just don't know that they wouldn't know.
It may not necessarily say in the case study, but I am pretty sure anybody that's at NASA or going to be an astronaut going in there has got to be aware of the risks that are involved too. I would want to be aware of, if that's going to be a debris that's falling off onto the spaceship and happens to be on fire and causes our shuttle to start on fire, I would like to at least know the risk that's involved in that before I make my decision to go up into space. So I'm pretty sure they probably know.
But that's part of the problem. If you look at what they code it as, and they keep downgrading it, so now it's like no more than a hangnail type description.
Right,
so,
exactly. Yeah. That's why I think they knew, though, because it had been a problem since day one. That's all I'm saying.
It's like they've made it to the point where it sounds like it's paint peeling. Like it's cosmetic.
That's how they kind of.
And these after-action reports, I mean, if you're a pilot reading this, I mean, the impression you're getting is that this is nothing. You're not getting the impression that this is a problem.
Yeah. I
feel like they don't think they're risking their life over foam at this point.
One of the things I have found really interesting in the case is when they talk about the foam, like you said, they downgrade everything, they keep reclassifying it to a different risk level, so it's almost non-existent. But even still, they put together a committee, a team that's supposed to figure out, the problem and figure out how to fix it. So, none of their policies, at least that they're not really following their own policies to begin with, but the policies they are following contradict each other. They have a risk assessment that says it's not at risk, but then at the same time they have a committee put together to figure out how to mitigate this risk. So it really just doesn't, it's not cohesive at all. It doesn't make any sense. So the fact that there's so much confusion on the ground, and I think what Cheryl's getting at is, they send him an email on the day of their descent that says, hey, by the way, this happened, don't worry about it. And a committee's been put together to figure it out, and they should get more of a heads up than that.
I'll be right back, guys. My daughter's crying. I'll be back.
The other piece of it, when you talk about like the crew and stuff, and the part that really bothered me the most of reading all of this, is the fact that the crew in those 16 days was never made aware that there was a problem. They were never given the opportunity to see if they could find out anything about it. There was one little request that was made to have the crew check it out, and it was never followed through on. And there was no other contact that I can see with the crew telling them there was a problem. Not even like, even if you assessed it that, okay, you're going to burn up at re-entry, they didn't even have the courtesy to let them contact their families.
I mean, considering doing like a spacewalk at one point to like go out and fix it. I remember reading something about that, but I don't know if
one guy put in one request to see if they could go out and check it, and the request never went anywhere, and he never followed up on it.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the confirmation bias. They didn't have a need to do anything like that because nothing ever happened, but nothing bad ever happened.
Right.
Right? I think that goes right back to
there's another part in here where they talk about they could have turned how they entered. If they, if you turned a different way so there wasn't so much heat or pressure or something on that section, then it might have been stable enough to survive. I mean, basically, they just threw away a crew of 7 people.
Yeah, I was shocked that they didn't.
What are your thoughts?
One of the things that bothers me is like when you read in the thing where they talked about Apollo 13 and the DAT crew became a Tiger team like right away, and all they did was focus on solving the problem, and that was the protocol for what was supposed to happen, and they didn't even do that. And like you're saying, they had 16 days to figure out how to fix this, and I'm just sitting there going, okay, we brought these people from Apollo 13 back with inferior technology. There has to have been something we could have done in that 16 days' time to figure out how to make this work.
It didn't feel like anybody was trying to figure out how to make it work. It felt to me like everybody was figuring out how to cover their butts.
Yeah.
Yep. So that kind of leads into our next, the next discussion topic is, everything that NASA was doing. They're launching shuttles into space. This isn't, a walk in the park. This is pretty complex stuff. How did NASA's oversimplification of, this process of what they were doing, really help to aid in the catastrophic events that happen?
So one of the things I wrote in my write-up was, look, like Air Force One, right? When they land Air Force One back in Washington, D.C., they comb over that entire plane and fix, like, everything. Take it apart, put it back. The engines are all taken apart and put back together every single time. And I don't understand why, if we could do that for Air Force One, why we wouldn't do that for a space shuttle when we've got 3 of them already anyway, or 4 or whatever. Why are we not, like, looking over the craft to make sure that it's good to go? Like,
because that didn't fit the budget.
Yeah, or their schedule. That's the problem, right? They're trying to launch these things like crazy to make money to keep their stuff going, and it just seems like there should have been some protocol where every inch of the craft. I mean, we're sending them into space for crying out loud. Like you said, this is not like a trip to grandma's house. And we've already had space shuttles blow up, right? It's like not out of the realm of possibility that we know this stuff could happen.
Because it was like half private, half government.
Right.
I mean, they're selling this at a discounted rate to private people to build these satellites in space and other stuff. At the same time, as the incentive to keep this program going so the government will help fund them. I mean, you're crossing all kinds of lines.
Yeah, I mean, what did it say in the case that they said that they could launch once every 10 days for the whole year, something like that, is what their expected schedule to be, but their actual launch times, which they were crunching and pushing through to get to and rushing past things, was like every 56 days. So the model that they put forward to approve a budget for this project was a launch every 10 days, and they couldn't even get it even anywhere near that mark. And that pressure of trying to reach the unattainable mark of where I don't know who came up with that estimate, but really pushed them to cut a lot of corners and to do some things that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mainly feel like if they just would have followed their own protocols, this probably wouldn't have happened. Like, it seems to me like they had the steps there to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen. They just either downgraded them or didn't even follow them. And it's like, if they just would have followed what they're supposed to do, then this might not have happened. I mean, that being said, you're going into space. Something can happen because they're wrong, right? I mean, there's just accidents that happen.
Right. There's a certain amount of risk involved, but they reduce the risk by not following protocols, by not doing what they should have done to protect
the human lives involved.
And I really got upset when I found out that they couldn't even, like, the team that was impaneled to figure out if the RCC or whatever that thing panels on the bottom of the space shuttle were damaged. They couldn't even get satellite. They couldn't even have the authority to get satellite images done. It's like, why does that need to go to the head of NASA or whatever? Why can't we just order these friggin' satellite photos? Why does it have to go through 8 layers of separation?
Well, not only ordering them, but they started to order them, and then they canceled them.
Yeah, the head guy canceled it. Yeah, the head guy canceled it because it had to go through 5 layers of bureaucracy before.
Yeah, I agree. So, you know, we know there's some serious issues and culture problems down at NASA. So, what ideas do you guys have that they could have done to kind of fix the culture that they had and limit the bureaucracy that they have? I mean, we have to realize also that it is a government agency, and they operate working for the state of Idaho is interesting. You know, we do some things that are just a huge waste of time, but that's, you know, we have to document every single breath that we take. So, you know, there's going to be a certain level of that exists with the national agency, but, you know, what are some things that they could have done to shorten that process?
I just have to say here, it's just a joke, okay? But that's why we should vote for Trump for president, okay?
Well, definitely not Bernie, anyway. Or Hillary.
Or Hillary.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that, too. I think they had protocols in place. If they just would have stuck to them, like if they would have followed protocol, they could have saved this crew.
Sure. If you look at that table, the chart of who's in charge of what where, it's a disaster. I mean, nobody's in charge of anybody if you look at this. Did you guys look at that chart? Exhibit 1?
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, they have a section where there's 5 different people.
Yeah, there's like mission director, flight director, this director, that director. It's like, who's the head person?
Right.
So let me ask you, what's the more challenging issue? Is it the organizational structure of NASA, or is it a lack of training that the upper management receives in understanding protocols and procedures?
You can't train if you don't have the proper construction in place. If you don't have the proper checks and balances of who's in charge of what, you can't train somebody because it doesn't matter what you train them, they have no place to take their information to.
I was thinking that there's like a lack of communication between the engineers and the people on top. The people on top kind of don't really know what is going on. They don't have a technical background. They're more like managers and politicians. And then when the engineers try to speak up about a problem or something, they just don't find a way to do it because they don't listen to them. I mean, the management doesn't listen to them, or I don't know, it doesn't go through the layers of bureaucracy.
I agree. Yeah, there's a huge disconnect there. So the analogy that I kept thinking about, Cheryl, the point that you brought up as far as you can train people, you know, but if they don't have anyone to report to, it doesn't really make sense, is, you know, if you have a door on a second story and you need to build stairs to get to it, you know, would you want to make sure that door, when you open it, went somewhere? Or would you rather build the stairs first and then open the door and have it be a wall? You know what I mean? You need to have some infrastructure in place before you start training people on, you know, where your doors are going to, who's your chain of command, who reports to who, before, you know, you can really expect your people to follow through with what you have in place.
Yeah.
So let's go back and let's talk about some of the history they talked about. Is when did the biggest problems with the Columbia shuttle itself? When did problems start to arise there, and what were some of the problems they had?
It said from the beginning, right? It was known as the hardest shuttle to launch, but the easiest to fly. That's part of my problem. They've known for decades that this thing has problems and issues. I don't understand how, knowing that, we don't fix it. I mean, their budget is billions and billions and billions of dollars. You would think that safety would be the most important aspect of what they do, and it just seems like all these bureaucrats making a ton of money. This makes me.
Yeah, I also think that there were some other interests because they could postpone some launches or some space shuttles because as the Challenger, I think, is another one that when it just landed off, it exploded because of the low temperatures or something like that. So I consider that there were some other interests besides the NASA itself because many other people didn't want to lose their, I don't know, their advices or the media, and maybe they changed the protocol or tried to manipulate it.
Well, and the other thing, when you talk about when did this start, and you can go back in here, it brings up the Challenger, which was in 1986, which was, what, 5 years before this? No, 15 years before this disaster. And the same issues happened with that, where the people in charge weren't really in charge. You know, like the decision-making process was all sort of gray. You know, the engineers are saying, well, it looks like there might be problems with this, and the people in charge are saying, well, you know, we've done this before, and these O-rings have worked, and then, ta-da, they don't work this time, and the thing blows up on launch.
Yeah, that's true.
So they had this problem 15 years ago, and they still didn't change how NASA was run.
And I think that happened because they thought more about, oh, well, that's going to cost us money if we delay it, and then it's going to look bad. And let's just go ahead and do it right now, But when it was such a simple, easy little problem. And then that should have been the first sign, they have an issue, they need to fix their, safety area. I don't know. I don't even know what we would call that division that would be in charge of the small safety stuff. But
that kind of goes back to my point in the beginning. It's like from the very first launch, they had foam strikes.
Yeah.
They have foam falling off. So 1970 something, the shuttle program was started. So they've known for, 40 years or something like that, 50 years. I mean, come on. How is it still happening?
Right. Looking back at it, I agree. I think the biggest problem that I see is I think them just making a decision as a group that what is safe to do and what is safe not to. I understand that they're in the industry to bring forth more science experiments, but also bring more, I guess, find more findings in space. But at the same time, I think it's better if you do it with people that are really good at their job and not risking their lives and using them as an asset rather than a liability. And I think that's kind of where it's coming down to is if you kind of look at it accounting way, you get your assets and your liability, but the liability is outweighing the assets right now because you're just caring more about furthering along the space program rather than taking care of the lives of the astronauts and their families. I know that may not be the case because that's not exactly how they say it, but based off their actions, they're not, it doesn't seem like they're really caring. That's my take. In the O-rings, exactly is a huge example of that. They were forewarned ahead of time that they were going to shrink because of the temperature, and they obviously didn't care enough about that. And what happened? It led to a disaster, and and everything else is history. So it's like they need to listen more to the science. They need to come together as a group better and discuss what's more important or outweigh the risks that are there. Are they really worth the risks? Is the risk really worth it? Is it really worth that?
Yeah, I think one of the problems is that when they're in flight, it seemed like the lady from Mission Control was in charge. and mission control being, okay, you got to make sure you stick to the schedule and get the experiments done. You got to make sure you stick to the schedule to get these other things done. And for me, one thing I would change is that, look, when they're in flight, the safety people are in charge, period. So if they're in flight, in orbit, whatever, if the safety people think there's an issue, then it doesn't matter what mission control does or what experiment gets delayed or not done. Safety is the most important thing. And I just think that I would make a decision that mission control was not in charge when they're in orbit or in flight. That's just me.
That goes back to the same thing, the hierarchy. Who's in charge of what? Who reports to who?
Yeah, because didn't it say that she was like, she told him basically, no, you have to stick to the schedule?
Yeah, well, it had to do with the fact that she was next in line. But she knew, I think it's page 8, this second or third paragraph, it talks about it. She admitted that the rationale for this whole thing was ridiculous, basically, that it was lousy, I think was her terms. But she also understood that she was next up for this new program that they were going to do. Yeah, so how do you, and that she had to have these things done for that new program to go into effect. So that's that. If you don't have much honor, I guess it's pretty easy to make the decision to sacrifice lives.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to see in a big agency like that, especially when lives are on the line. But I mean, it happens all the time on the corporate level where, maybe it's not someone's life, but maybe their livelihood and their investments and everything else. It seems to be fairly common. What are some things that you guys would see and outside motivations or influences that have contributed to this? Not besides maybe the culture at NASA, but some other outside influences that really drove this disaster. I can tell you a big one for me that comes to mind is, this is the space agency in the 70s, made some major, huge, groundbreaking accomplishments in the Apollo missions, getting to the moon and doing all kinds of things, and getting people to space, which 30 years before would have been science fiction and no one would have ever thought possible. And here we are in the 80s and 90s, and what is NASA telling the world that they are accomplishing is, hey, we got a shuttle and we can put satellites in space. It's not that exciting. So I think that was a contributor to some of the decisions that they're making, is they're trying to chase the nostalgia of the glory days of NASA and trying to push more than was really achievable, and that led to in part to their downfall.
I think also you got to realize the changing in our culture, in that the government is just, it got to the point, it is at the point where the government can't be touched. It's able to do whatever it wants without any consequences. And that starts back when you start looking at like the Nixon administration and the things that happened there, and then going forward with some of the things that happened in Vietnam, and it continues through our presidencies and how we handle things and the people. I mean, think about the Clinton administration and the things he did in office, and it's okay. And now his wife is now running. If you look at all that, you see where all of a sudden our government and the people who run it are no longer held to a high enough standard, and it has the trickle down effect. I mean, all these people that are working in our government, I mean, they have no morals in here. I mean, you're looking at a bunch of people with no morals, just no sense of what is right and what is wrong on a very biblical level. You know what I mean? They just don't, and that started back in pretty much started the Nixon administration. I mean, you get a little bit if you go back into like Eisenhower and nuking and stuff like that. But the real degradation of our government and the idea that these people had a moral obligation to behave in a certain way started in the Nixon administration and has continued to this day.
Anybody have anything else they'd want to add on that point?
Sorry.
Oh, you're good. Okay, so back to the organizational structure of NASA. What structure do you think would be most beneficial to solve the bureaucracy that they have? I mean, we know that if they were to follow their policies and procedures, that would definitely assist, in what they're trying to do. But, as far as the structure, would you guys put a board in place that everyone reports to? Should there be one person in charge? How would you organize this structure to help mitigate these problems?
Yeah, you know what? I thought a lot about that, and the problem is, it's almost like what Cheryl was saying. So you appoint a board, and then they get apathetic too, and then you appoint another board, then you appoint another one. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and nobody cares. So I just thought for me that the only thing to do is that these people need to go to prison. There has to be a consequence for their actions, and if there's not, then you could appoint one person to be in charge, in my mind, or a board accountable to whoever, and unless there's a consequence, it's probably not going to change.
I agree. I actually did, for one of my questions, as the solution, I did an organizational chart up, because this one to me seemed to be such a disaster. And part of it was impounding a panel from, how there's three places, there's Houston, there's Johnson, and there's Marshall, or whatever, there are three different places, that there had to be a supervisor or director from each of those places. And when these type of problems came about, they were required to meet within so many hours and gather information from each of their lower departments. And the three of them combined had to come up with a response to whatever the issue was, and that those three would be held liable for their decision.
Yeah, I just think without accountability, nothing will change.
Yeah,
I agree.
If it doesn't change within them, other companies will kind of see their example and think that there's nothing wrong with it either. So they need to face the consequences of that. That's being thrown in prison or something.
Has anyone heard of the incident command system?
No.
So the incident command system it's implemented by FEMA. FEMA uses it, but it originated from fire departments. So back in the 70s, fire departments were finding the similar problem that, you've got so many people in charge of so many different things, and, in a perfect world, in a perfect fire, you would have these clear-cut lines of who's in charge of what and who's responsible for this, and committees in place to collaborate on the best way to approach things. But when you get out in large incidents and large fires that are, not so clear-cut, it gets real dicey and it gets really complicated. So they developed this system called the incident command system that basically is, it starts off with an incident commander, and that person, for better or for worse, it's set up almost like a dictatorship. That person has the final say, they're in charge, and based on, what's needed, what resources are needed to be deployed, what resources are available, there's different organizational structures underneath that person, but at the end of the day, the incident commander is the one who everyone reports to. So everyone has a person that they report to specifically, and then people that are, everyone has people that they are directly in charge of. So you have this direct tree of accountability that everyone knows who's their boss and who they're in charge of. And within this structure, let's say, for example, there's a safety division that has to do with a lot of safety protocols and firefighter safety and things of that nature. there's also a person that would be in charge of the food tent, that feeds all the firefighters on some of these national wildfires. If the food person in charge needed something done from the safety side of things, they would have to go to the person in charge of safety and request things that they need done from them. And then the person in charge of safety would divvy out the instructions to their people. So that way there's only one person that you receive instructions from and only one person that you take orders from. So it eliminates this, well, technically they're my boss and they're my boss and I'm supposed to listen to them, they're higher ranking than me. And it eliminates all this confusion. And it's something that works really, really well. The Department of Lands uses it for national forest fires and things, and to see it work is really, really incredible. And so, for example, if we're applying that to this case with NASA and trying to look at the Tiger team that was put in place to, essentially their policies were already in place to have this Tiger team review and come up with a solution to the foam that was falling and to see if there was damaged tiles and what that would do to the impact of reentry for this shuttle. If they requested some information, they should be reporting to one person, and that information should go up the chain of command to that. Even when it got to that top individual in charge, when she received the word that there was imaging being requested, she should be in the loop and she should know that was being requested, know what it's for, and know that it's important. She's put that committee in place and has that direction. She should be able to have no problems approving that message to get the information that they need in order to do their jobs. So that's something that I put in my write-up as far as, something that the government already uses, something that the national government has used for 40, 50 years, but, it doesn't seem to work for NASA, even though it works for, every other agency that they have.
Interesting. One of the things that I thought of, which is not quite like yours, but that sounds really good, is I thought that they should have a review board every time, that there is a death. Like when the hospitals have a review board, which a bunch of different people from a bunch of different departments get together, and they go over, whether it was a good death or a bad death.
Justified.
Yeah. How did this happen? Who was in charge of what? How did it work? Blah 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 blah. So that they can improve it for the next time. And I thought that they should have something like that in place to evaluate what they're doing. There's no oversight.
Yeah, I think they probably do have that, actually. It just didn't say it in the...
I don't know. If you listen to this whole thing, the whole write-up of this whole thing, all they talk about is the technical and the organization. What were the technical problems, and who was responsible for that, and what are the organizational problems, and they never talk about this crew. I'm sorry, I know I'm probably hopping on this, but it bothers me to read this and find that, that's what the discussion was, what was the technical problem, and, what was the organizational problem, and nothing about, people's lives were lost, and who was in charge of that? Who was responsible for making a decision that would kill 7 people?
It's all numbers, it's all X's and O's, and it's all dollars, it seems.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think honestly, it's frustrating because you can hear about how much it costs them to, have this program, but it almost seems like they're running it more as a business. It's all about the money rather than, the respect for the people that are actually working and trying to make it as safe as possible. I know they probably try to do the best that they can, but I don't think their best is good enough yet. It's concerning, and it's a little frustrating to me when I read through it, and I'm just like, I didn't realize that NASA had all these problems until I read the case, and I'm actually kind of surprised. I would think some big program like this that was started by the government originally, you know, I would think would have things worked out. It's really disappointing to me that they don't.
Well, yeah, and the thing that is really sad is that it totally screwed the shuttle program. I mean, that's part of the reason why we don't send shuttles into space anymore, and we have to rely on the Russians to get all our crap done now. And it's really sad that.
Yep.
But I guess that's what happens when you don't have good organizational effectiveness.
So
Tie-in. Very nice. All right, so the last question I have for our discussion is, who ultimately is accountable and responsible, and why do you think that person or group of people is responsible?
Go ahead.
I think it comes down to basically the people that are in charge of that mission. Whoever was assigned responsibility for that mission, it comes down to that responsibility. I know there was multiple missions that had problems, but I think it comes down to whoever was the main one in charge of that specific mission that should be responsible, because they're the ones in charge of that mission. They were assigned that mission. They should take the whole full responsibility of what happens.
I agree. I think mission control, and I also think that the bureaucrats back in Washington, D.C., like the head of NASA and all those guys, should have been held accountable.
Yep.
I think every single person who had knowledge of any kind of those plate things and had even a teeny bit of information about them should be held responsible. I think we all should be held responsible in life. That's like saying you work for a business, and you're just the person who, sweeps the warehouse, okay? But you see every day that somebody that people in that warehouse are doing things wrong. They're doing things illegal or something, or however you want to put it. But because you're the person that's pushing a broom, you're not responsible. That's not true. Every person in here who knew something, and there was 40, 50 different people in here they talk about, not including all the other people they didn't mention. They all should be held responsible. They all had knowledge. Didn't do anything with it. Anyway, that brought dead silence. Sorry again.
Your comments were so good. Didn't have to say anything.
So we're pretty much out of time now, then, or what?
I don't know where Matt went. Did Matt get off?
Yeah, it says he left. He might have just lost his connection.
Yeah, he might have. I think ultimately, like you guys said, the main person that's in charge or the responsibility is Mission Control and back at Washington, D.C. and everybody in between. They need to be responsible for it. They're the ones that took on this high responsibility of making sure the mission goes through smoothly and that the astronauts come home safely. So someone needs to be accountable for that, for their, misinformation or, the plans of whatever was, whatever came about of it, whatever mistake they made, they need to, make sure that they're accountable. And I think they really should, I bet you they did, but I think they need to apologize to the families of the people that were lost, but I think they did a good job of that, but I think overall they're the ones that are ultimately responsible for their actions, and
it's just negligence.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember watching in elementary school Challenger blow up.
Yeah.
And it was a national disaster, and it just seems that they learned nothing from that.
Yeah.
And I just think that's negligence, and you know, I don't know, negligent homicide or something. But somebody needs to have the book thrown at them.
Yeah, I definitely will not be signing up to be one of the main guys at NASA, that's for sure, because I don't want the responsibility. Not until they get their act together.
Sorry, guys, my internet dropped out there.
Oh, you're okay. So we have about 10 minutes left, so we can either, you know, I don't know if we're done or you want to keep going, whatever. But that was like your last question, right, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have anything else. The last things I really want us to talk about are, you know, some personal experiences or applications where this applies, but you know, we've pretty much sprinkled that through the whole discussion. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually need to get going right now. Yeah, my wife is calling me.
Oh.
Okay. Well, so who's responsible for tomorrow? Next week, sorry, Wednesday. Do you remember who's in charge?
I think it's me, but I'm not sure.
Let me pull up the document real quick. I should have it. Let me see. I should have it saved. Oh, where is it?
Well, he's looking up that. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Made for a good discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where is it?
I really like this one. I had no idea. I don't know. I learned a lot about NASA. I didn't know that they had like such good opportunities to prevent all that stuff from happening. I was like, really, you know, I don't know, bigger problems that they had that would have been to understand, but it just seemed like they forgot the little things. That's all.
Yeah, I'm with you. I didn't know that was going on with it either.
Yeah,
I remember
I
getting
just found
angry.
the sign up document, and yeah, it's me. Yeah,
It's you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Yeah, I was trying to find it, but I'm not sure where I saved it to. So.
Yeah, I have it. Maybe I can resend it to all of you. I have it here.
I can find it. It's not a big deal.
But I need to get going now. Good night.
Okay, sounds good. See ya.
All right.
Okay, so he'll be next week. So plan on the same time. We're good with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sounds good.
Plan on 8 o'clock and go from there. So. And I'll just upload this to the discussion board. Do you guys know if on the discussion board we're supposed to do anything besides just upload our link? I don't think we have to.
I think it's only one person uploads the link too.
Right,
I didn't
think
upload
so.
anything either.
Yeah.
Last week.
I know on the reading discussion board we have to, you know, comment or, you know, on other people and do what it tells us to do, but I didn't think on this one we had to.
No,
Does
I don't think we
only
do.
one of us submit the video?
Yeah. I submitted it last week. I'll just do it again just because I get the link and it's just easy to upload, so I can just do that real quick.
Nathan, are you sure? I think we're supposed to discuss on the discussion board.
I don't know. I didn't. If you go look at the instructions, I was looking at the case study. Let me go see real quick.
Yeah, it says specifically in the instructions to not post comments.
It says, yeah, it says right here, it says, remember to include your team name or other means identifying your group in the title of your post. Your instructor will occasionally join you in your discussion. Yeah, it says in there you're not supposed to, you don't comment on it, so.
I have a question. Are we supposed to actually do these reading discussion boards? Because I don't see on the grade section, there's nowhere to grade anybody on it.
There's a couple things that aren't there on the reading, on the discussion, the grading thing, I mean.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was just missing and they added it at the end. The way this class is going this semester.
Yeah, I would just say just do it, just to be safe.
Okay, are you looking at the, I'm sorry to interrupt, but where it says case study activity, that's a discussion board.
Right.
Yeah, but if you go to the instructions.
Discussion board.
Yeah, if you go to the instructions.
Yeah.
So click on the instructions. It says, hold on, let's see.
It says all students, and you'll be covered in a short amount of time. Come to your Hangout meeting with your questions and comments to maximize the time you spend. Do not post comments or responses in the discussion board. The group leader might invite you to, the video, and then it talks about, what you should talk about. It says discuss the week's case with your group. Locate the link in one of the posts. Follow the link to access your group's meeting if you didn't make it. And it says the group leader is supposed to post the link for it, and that's it.
So I guess I can just send you the link, Matt, and if you can just upload it, maybe we'll just do that from now on. Just
Sure.
before we just weren't just uploading it to the link. So every week from now on, I'll just send a link to the group leader, and he can upload the link to it. So.
Does anybody know what group number we are?
I just sit under group 1. I have no idea. We don't have
Sounds
a group
good.
number.
Yeah, we don't have.
So I would just upload it, and we'll be fine.
So what I'll do this week is I'll put it under group 1, and I'll just make sure to put all of our names in there also, so they know who's in that group.
Okay.
And that way, since only I'm posting it, or whoever's posting it, they know who attended and who should get credit, if they're even looking at it.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, I'll send you the link, Matt, and we'll talk to you guys all and see you guys next Wednesday. So.
All right.
Okay.
See everybody. Thanks.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
See ya.
All right. See ya.